Harry Beckhoff, and he's a very sprightly 93, fantastic person who was a code breaker during the war, and he has a very, very deep inside knowledge of the Nazi connection with the European Union, which we should know about. And I'm just going to give you a very quick little biography of him. Excuse me if I read this from the back of his book. Right, Harry Beckhoff was born in Bristol, 1914. He's an honours graduate of Bristol University, and he specialised in German. Studying in Freiburg University in 1933, he witnessed Hitler's rise to power. In World War II, he was commissioned in the Royal Artillery, served in India until taken over by Bletchley Park as a code breaker, and he served with the 8th Army, breaking Rommel's signals and messages from Montgomery. After Alamein victory, he was recalled to India to serve with the 14th Burma Army, dealing with Japanese code signals. That's just a small part of it. Let me show you one of the books here that Harry has written. Very, very interesting indeed. And let me show you another one here. This one specialises in the code breaking during the war. Highly recommend you to read this. Brilliant. Okay, and another book is nearly out of print now, and this is one that he wrote earlier on, much earlier on, and this tells you who really wrote the first chapters in the Bible. Very, very interesting, and a must read. Get one before they go out of print.
The first 5 books.
The first 5 books, he said. Right, okay, so I'm going to introduce you to Harry Beckhoff now, and he's going to just tell you very briefly how he got into code encrypting. So Harry, how did you get into code breaking, and how did you come to be in Germany at the time Hitler came to power?
Well, the first question, I was serving in India with the 14th Army, and I was right up on the corners of the north of India overlooking Afghanistan, when I had a message to say that a secret communication had been received demanding my presence. I didn't know what it was, but I immediately answered and was taken to a place in the far, far corner called Abbottabad, and hidden in the jungle was a unit arranged by Bletchley Park for a course for all the officers they could find who could speak German. Reason, they had lack of communication to Germany, to the Rommel and his army in the western desert of Egypt, and they wanted to find out exactly what he was up to. And so they sent us on this course of about 20 odd officers, and it was a very tough course, and after a month only 2 of us passed, and we were flown straight to Egypt to start breaking Rommel's codes, and that's what I was engaged in until the victory of Alamein. After Alamein, I was recalled to India to join the 14th Burma Army to help breaking Japanese codes. So that's how it began.
All right. Okay, can you tell us about how you came to be in Germany at the time Hitler came to power?
Well, I was taking an honours degree course in my University of Bristol, especially in German, and part of the course meant that I had to spend at least 1 or 2 semesters in Germany, and I chose to go to Freiburg University in the Black Forest. That was in 1933, and while I was there, Hitler came into power. I heard his opening speeches, and I knew we were in trouble. There were other students with me who likewise feared the results of Hitler's speeches, especially when they started burning books in the marketplace, which annoyed me so much that against the suggestions of my comrades, I reached out and picked up 2 or 3 books. One was Heine's poems, and the other were books by Thomas Mann.
Right.
Fortunately, the German brown shirts didn't see me, or I might have suffered the consequence. At the same time, or shortly after, I witnessed the smashing of all the windows in the shops called the Kristallnacht. So when I returned from Germany, I already had a pretty good knowledge of what was brewing in that country. And on my second visit, that was confirmed. When I returned to Bristol to get my degree, the Chancellor of my university was Churchill, Winston Churchill. And I said to him, when he was handing me my degree, I've just returned from Germany, so he held me back for conversations later, and told him I'd written to the newspapers who had refused to print the stories. And he said, you're suffering now something of what I've been going through. But you have to keep on and don't give in, because the Germans won't give in and we mustn't. So that was how I came to go to Germany first.
All right. Pause. Well, we're just giving you a little background here into Harry Beckhoff and how he came to know what he does know about the European Union and the Nazis. So it's very, very unique experiences this gentleman's had, and believe me, so interesting. He's actually writing his biography at the moment, so hold on tight and the book will come out, and we should tell you where to get it when the time comes. I'm sure you it's going to be really, really interesting. So back to our story of Germany's 4 Reichs and the connection between the Nazis and the European Union. And I'm just going to ask Harry now, how did you come to meet Adenauer?
Well, having dealt with the Germans during the war, breaking Rommel's codes and learning all about them more and more, I was sent after the war by Foreign Office to reopen the German universities in the Rhineland, and I was based in Cologne. Mm-hmm. And whilst in Cologne, I met Konrad Adenauer and members of his staff, and we became quite friendly. He didn't know I'd been in intelligence. He thought I was simply an academic come to help the University of Cologne. He actually lived in Bonn. The Adenauer family had a house in Bonn, and that was how he came to choose that little town of Bonn as the first German government base.
Oh, wow.
Now, Adenauer was a very wily individual called the Old Fox. And he and I became quite friendly. I met his brother, who was a professor at Cologne University, emeritus, and his sister, who was married to the town clerk of Cologne. And they were quite useful in helping me to get the university started, because the university was badly damaged. I spent 4 years bringing the university back to life and trying to teach the students and the staff to become good Democrats. A very difficult job to teach the Germans to do. When I came back from Germany, I decided to write a book with my knowledge of Germany, because my knowledge goes back to the first beginnings of the German people, who actually owe their name to the Romans, who named them Germani, meaning the warlike people.
Yeah.
And Churchill made the profound remark, the Germans have been belligerent for 2,000 years and they never change. And he couldn't have made a more truthful remark in all his life, because from that early time when they were part of a tribe of Germans to Charlemagne, who began the first Holy Roman Empire, amazingly enough by accident. He had just rescued the Pope of those days, who had been attacked by people who were dissatisfied with him. And in reward, the Pope made him the first Holy Roman Emperor. And the Germans have tried to keep that on ever since. Charlemagne, with the Pope, decided he was going to turn all the German tribes and all the neighboring people into good German Catholics. And he did it by blood and sword. He called it Blut und Eisen, blood and iron. So they didn't actually give in. They were rather forced into becoming good Catholics. And ever since Charlemagne, the Germans have had the idea that they are the inheritors of the Holy Roman Empire, and as such should do as Charlemagne, try to rule Europe. And it's gone on ever since that day, and it still exists today, right up to the First World War, after Bismarck, and the Second World War. From the Kaiser of the First World War to Hitler of the Second, the same idea has permeated all through German history, that they are the rightful dominant power of Europe, and all Europe should be under their sway. And they still think the same thing today. That's why they are the power, the dominant power in the European Union.
So how did Germany actually come to join the European Union?
Well, the beginning of the European Union is very problematic. There are many theories about it. Whether a little man called Monnet started it, but I can tell you that there were quite a lot of countries having a play in the beginning, including America, who thought the formation of the European Union would be to their benefit industrially. However, Germany was defeated in World War II, but completely. And Germany's country was smashed, and nobody thought they stood much chance of recovery. But they had a leader still, who was a man called Strauss, nothing like the musician, who was the president of Bavaria. And he was the wise German of his day. He said to them, "You've tried wars now 3 times and been defeated every time. The last was the worst of all. So you're not going to try again, because you still won't beat Britain.
Yeah.
You have to be crafty and full of guile. And the way to do it lies in front of you with the formation of the European Union. That's where you have to get yourself back into understanding and good relations with Europe, who hates you at the moment. Now, that's something you have to overcome. And I think it will take you 10 years if you'll be guided by me. And the way you do it is forget about warlike aggression and go the other way. Use a long-term, gentle approach so that people begin to think that you are now nice people and not nasty people. And they will gradually listen to your conversation and fall for your compliments. Go that way, and you'll find that gradually the French, who hate you at the moment, will begin to like you. And that's exactly what happened. Instead of becoming aggressive, the Germans went the other way, took time out over 10 years or more, and gradually were accepted by the French into the EU.
Yeah.
That was the craft and the guile of the Germans. This went on until they had the French so cleverly affiliated to them, with the help of Adenauer and de Gaulle, who became very good friends. The Germans were then accepted into EU. As soon as they were accepted, they began to begin all over again the old aggressive spirit, because what they wanted, and they were being led by the Nazis who had returned from the war. Did you know that Adenauer had 150 members of the old Nazis who'd come back from the war, having escaped in the war, in his cabinet? He actually told me about all those people who joined him. Now, once they were ensconced as accepted members of the EU, they developed this friendship with France, and the Germans and the French have been hand in hand in the EU ever since. Britain only entered when Macmillan thought the economy of Britain was in such a poor state that they needed to be in Europe in order to recover. He was actually quite wrong, because Europe was in a pretty poor state itself at the time and needed money from Britain to help it. However, what happened was that Macmillan employed Heath, who was his junior minister at the time, to make overtures to Europe. Eventually, Heath became Prime Minister, and he set about firming up his applications to Europe, because the first two applications made whilst de Gaulle was in power had been completely refused by de Gaulle, who simply said, no, didn't want you. England wouldn't fit in. However, de Gaulle died, and Heath, therefore, was now able to get in. And that happened in 1971-72. When the vote of the referendum was taken by the people of Britain as to whether they should join this huge, great European Union, there was an antipathy. The people of Britain were not interested in becoming part of Europe. They were always an island to itself and in their own strength. But Heath, I'm afraid, told a pack of lies and said, the only reason I have for joining the European Union is for the trade and commerce we should be doing. There are over 250 million people sitting in the European Union waiting to do trade with you. That's all there is to it. And his right-hand man, Ripon, Lord, who said exactly the same thing. This is only a common market for trading of goods. Absolute lies, because the whole intent was to bind Britain into Europe. And that's exactly what they did.
Right, Harry, we do hear from various sources that had the Germans conquered Europe during the war, they had certain plans laid out for what they were going to do with Europe, how they were going to handle it, manipulate it. Can you enlarge on that for us?
Oh, yes. You always have to go back to find the germ of the truth. Mm-hmm. For instance, it's not generally known on what good terms Russia and Germany are. And it really began with Bismarck, who achieved good friendship with the Russian powers. The Kaiser didn't accept that, and therefore dismissed Bismarck. But Germany, from the very beginning, has always sought through every ruler, every leader, to conquer Europe. But the ideas went further. And that's why today they're not satisfied with the EU as it stands, the European Union. They are trying to bring in a new constitution for Europe, which eventually, if accepted by all the powers of Europe, will turn them into unitary units with no sovereign power of their own. no freedom, no law of their own, no parliament of their own. They will become units of a super state ruled over by Germany. France does not understand, but is to a certain extent beginning to understand that they are only a tool in the hands of the Germans. It, however, progresses from there. The idea that the Germans always had of their friendship with Russia meant that they could expand beyond Europe into the East and join up with Russia, which abuts upon the East. And between them, they would have a complete power. Not only that, but it became quite obvious that Germany was intensely jealous of America and sets out not only to compete with America, but to beat America as much as possible in all forms, but especially in commerce and utility, as well as arms and munitions. In other words, at the back of the German mind always is a growing essential power, which he leads eventually to conquest of most of the world. The ambition grows and grows with time. Now, Germany couldn't have done this on her own. There wasn't sufficient money available in Germany even to start the First World War. The Kaiser didn't have all the wealth necessary. But the Kaiser was financed partly from America by American banks. When you turn to Hitler, it is astonishing to remember that Hitler was a beggar in the streets before he came to power, and that coming to power was extremely fast. How did it happen? He didn't have the money to start this Nazi movement, to engage thousands of people, dress them in their uniforms, maintain them, pay them, look after them. Where did all the money come from? Where did the money come from to build the arms, the armaments? Oh, I know that Krupp was a very expensive and fabulously wealthy organization, but they didn't have enough to build a whole war, nor to build the battleships. The astonishing thing is that after every war, we immediately start to disarm. Germany never disarms. After the First World War, which ended in 1918, there was the Versailles Treaty, forbidding Germany to have any more than 100 men in arms. What was not known was that Germany made secret assignments with Russia in 1921-22, and they had an agreement signed in a place called Rapallo in Italy, whereby Russia would allow Germany to build arms, build factories, train men, build an army, on the condition that they also trained the Russians. So this secret army was being prepared in the 20s while Britain was busily disarming, as did much else of Europe. So by the time the war was coming in the 1930s, we were in a wretched state in comparison with Germany, which was becoming the greatest power again in the world. The strange thing is that although they followed Strauss's behests to gain power in Europe, they've also found their way out of the war treaty after World War II into breaking that rule and starting to rebuild. So that today they actually have over 300 men in arms, at arms, with armaments. They are 3 times greater in armament strength and army strength than Britain.
That's not generally known.
Britain is still busy disarming, even though we are being used more and more by Europe to fight their wars for them, and also partly by America. I won't go at the moment into the relationship between Bush and Blair, but it must be said that money from America, from American German sources, helped Hitler come to power. And one of the major families mentioned is the wealthiest in America, called Rockefeller. And stories are that there is an association which helped Hitler finance his war effort in World War II. So you see, the association of ideas is not just to turn Europe into a superstate, but to turn America also from a democratic country, a republic, into a superstate on the same lines as the EU, to join up eventually to form a world superstate. Once they've done that, because they have so much money behind them, they own the banks, they own the money of the world. They have accrued such money since the 18th, 19th century that the rest of us look like minuscule in comparison. But that money means power, and the power has gone to their heads so that they believe they have the right to rule the world, and they are trying to build a world government with them as the leaders. They are the great people.
So, Harry, who's actually pulling the strings behind the various governments and what's going on here? Who's doing it? Who are they?
Well, Fran, you ask some imposing questions. This goes back a very long way. In fact, deep into the 18th century. About the middle of the 18th century, there was formed an organization called the Illuminati. Now, Illuminati, the illumined, comes from the leading angel of the Lord, if you remember, who was the Lord's favorite and was called the angel of light, the illumined one. Unfortunately, like so many spoilt children, he fell from heaven and was turned into what later became known as the devil. The Illuminati are a people who believed in the devil as a greater power than any other. And they were led around 1740 to 50 by a Jesuit priest, dissatisfied. That's where so many things come from, the dissatisfaction of people. He decided to support the devil in his best way. To do that, he started an organization called the Illuminati, the illumined one. They're the children of the devil, if you like. And he brought in people who were great thinkers, kings, leaders, dictators, and above all, leading Freemasons. And that conglomerate created this Illuminati. From the Illuminati has developed over the years these people of great power who seek more and more power. You had the Fabians in England are the people who sought power in the major size, a sort of power which was going to deprive the people of the country from their rights under the law and turn them into semi-slaves on the basis, if you like, of something like the Russian ideal of communism. And this is the sort of thing which astonishing people like George Bernard Shaw actually believed in. They believed in depriving the people of their freedom and sovereign rights to turn them into one complete entailment. Not only were these Illuminati descendants to be found in Europe, and especially in the Fabians in Britain, but they were also to be found in America, and they still are. And they've grown stronger and stronger in America, being the most powerful country in the world. They had the freedom to grow and to expand. And they have done things in America with the value of the dollar and the value of the gold, which take a lot of discovering, believe me. It's worthwhile finding out all you can, and finding out who the people are who are behind it, because until you find out who they are, you do not find the means of dealing with them. And that's what's going on in the world today. It does not harbor well for any of us. For instance, England has led the world with its sense of freedom and justice, and indeed has fought over 1,000 years for the rights and freedom we enjoy today. One of our greatest assets is the building of the law of Britain, which has been followed by a great many countries of the world. And one of the great features of that law, which has been admired by the whole world, is the freedom of being not guilty of any crime until you are proved to be guilty. Now, the European law, which is the Napoleonic law, is exactly the reverse. According to European law, corpus juris, you are guilty until you can prove your own innocence. And with that strength, they can put you in prison and leave you there for as long as they wish, until you can prove your innocence. It doesn't happen with British law so far, until Blair gets at it. And that is, you are still innocent in British eyes and in British law until you're proven guilty. So you are supposedly still in America, which had its own constitution, very well prepared by its founding fathers. Unfortunately, it doesn't hold as good today as it did before, and that needs investigating. Because unless we stand up and fight for our rights again, as we have done over thousands of years in this country, and America has done since its founding fathers, we shall both be doomed to fall to these evil powers descended from the Illuminati, still prevalent today, and still trying to rule the world and turn us into a semi-communist state, something like 1984, if you remember.
Yes.
That's what we are now fighting.
So in a sense, the Nazis, with their fascism, was actually socialism.
Well, the Nazis
Since
carried on the
time.
German notorious desire to rule.
Yeah.
They believe they are the greatest nation in the world, and it's their right to conquer and rule Europe, and they go beyond that. And the Nazis carried that to extreme.
Yeah.
They thought they were the Aryan leaders of the world, the founding race, the leading people. Unfortunately, the facts which have turned up since have shown that they were as corrupt as any other country ever was.
Okay, Harry, I'm very interested to know why we've been inundated with political correctness these days. It's coming at us from all sides now, and people are getting very upset by it. It's stirring them up almost to rebellion point. Where is it coming from? Why are they instigated? Who instigated this? What's it all about?
This is just one of the weapons being used to change the minds of people and subjugate them to disciplines which they've never experienced in their lives. And again, you have to go back to the Illuminati and the development of the tricks of the devil. During the communist regime, under people like Lenin, the Russians tried to develop measures by which they could alter the minds of people, change their mental state, subject them to treatment which would change them mentally by one means or another. Now, this was followed by Germany, as usual, under the Nazis and the Holocaust. You remember they maltreated the prisoners and they carried out medical experiments to try to change the brains and the minds and the thinking of people. So this progresses from the communists to the Nazis, and it's going on now with the people behind the EU, here in Europe and in America. Now, what they've learnt about adjusting the mental processes of the people has led them to experiment with ways and means of moving the minds of people in a way they wish them to go. Now, political correctness is an exact definition of that sort of mental arrangement. By bringing in all kinds of completely unnecessary rules and regulations, they get people tied up in knots, so they don't know whether they're coming or going. They don't know whether they're going to be arrested for doing this or arrested for doing that, or when they're going right or when they're going wrong, or what is correct and what is not correct. Now, this extends from the European Union into the governments, including our government, our British government. So that you find odd situations whereby an intruder climbs into a house and attacks the men in the house, who responds in kind, and then finds himself collected by the police and put in prison, whereas the intruder goes free. That's a form of political correctness. Somebody makes a complaint to the police about the misdoings of somebody or other, and finds to their surprise that they're carried off to the police station to be questioned. These are forms of political correctness, so that you become bewildered by what's right and what's wrong, and you're not quite sure which is which. Again, the whole idea is to move the minds of the people so they're no longer free, as they were originally brought up, as we were as children, to think for themselves and be guided by the normal rules of conduct. These are taken away. Those vanish. The normal rules have gone. New rules are interpolated of such a mixture that you don't know one from the other. And that is what they're doing to the minds of people today. This is going through schools. Children in schools are being taught the different forms of thinking, quite different from the ones we were brought up with. This is a way of manipulating the minds of people, and that's what's meant by political correctness.
You all know out there about the BBC Broadcasting Corporation, which is the original and much revered broadcasting medium of the UK, and their news coverage goes worldwide, big time in America, I know, and everybody believes everything they say because it's the BBC. Well, I'll tell you now, the BBC is actually financed partly by its viewers, because to have any sort of a receiver here that picks up television signals, we have to buy a license, which costs well over £100 a year, and that's just to receive the signal. Okay, we have absolutely no say in what the programs are. They may say we do, we certainly don't, and we know that there are some people behind the scenes pulling the strings at the BBC, and this coverage is not as unbiased as you think it is. So let's ask Harry now what he knows about it. I think you're going to get a little surprise here. Harry, what do you know about the BBC then and its unbiased attitude?
Well, Fran, it's not just the BBC, it's the whole of the media.
Mm-hmm.
Who moves the media? You go back to these wealthy people who are behind the EU, because the European Union doesn't exist as an entity on its own. There are all these powerful people. Remember, I traced the history from the Illuminati to the great bankers and the great money makers of the world who own and hold the money of the world. Money doesn't mean anything. They can spend as much as they like. And they own the mass of the media. And if they own it or control it or are the power behind the media then prints what they say, as Murdoch's media does, for instance. Therefore, they control what comes out of the media to the people. And what you read in your newspapers is therefore colored by their decision. Funny thing that we don't hear much about the European Union against the European Union. And with the BBC, it draws its funds not just from the subscribers and the listeners, but from the government. Blair's Labour government, which is an EU strong government. It also, to my understanding, has borrowed vast sums of millions from the European Union's bank. Now, is it likely that the BBC is going to come out and say bad things about the European Union? Or even this government? Not likely, is it? Is it likely that you will hear bad things from the media about the European Union bosses or those behind the European Union? You don't find tirades against the European Union, do you? And yet, some of the journalists, now and again, release some information, or it's allowed to slip through, but very rare is that. That's my answer.
Okay, thank you.
It's the money rules the world.
And Harry, as we've been going around interviewing people for the internet, for that little series of interviews here, I've been asking people, we hear so much from the public in despair. What can we do about it? We're only just one little person. What's the use of voting? What's the use of shouting, demonstrating? No one's taking any notice. Have you got any advice, ideas that the ordinary person in the street can do to combat what's going on around us right now? So some way that we can stop this march of global power.
Well, the successes of the European Union and the people who follow the European Union in this country and other parts of Europe and who ever since Heath betrayed us into the European Union have carried on the association. Now depends upon the apathy of the people. If you notice in the last elections, the number of people going to the vote has grown less and less.
Yes, yes.
People are tired of what is being done against them in their own country. It's happening in America, and there are more and more people dissatisfied there as here, because gradually they're not exactly finding out what's been going on, but they're getting the feeling of dissatisfaction, as the people generally are now in this country about this Labour government.
Yes.
What can they do? Well, on their own, there's very little they can do. But there are organizations which they can join who are totally anti-EU.
Yes.
There are organizations whose main spring is to get out of the EU as fast as possible.
Right.
There's one organization called Bruges and CIP and other people of that nature whose motto is get out now.
Right.
Now, if people join these organizations, gradually they will grow in strength. And there is at least a dozen they can make a choice of to join, all with the same idea, all now demanding ways and means of finding ways of getting out of Europe. You cannot do it on your own, but join any organization from one to another. You will find that your strength will grow. The more numbers that come in, the greater will grow the strength. Somehow we have to go out and fight and keep fighting in every way possible to get out of Europe and get the European Union is notorious for the fact that if they put up a referendum and people say no, they don't want to join, as happened in Denmark,
Yes,
and first of all in Ireland, they don't accept no for an answer. They just keep on like tossing a penny until it comes down heads.
yeah.
But gradually that's becoming known. And the present situation, which is about one of the grimmest, is that the Germans, especially in Europe, but bringing the rest of Europe with them, have said they do not accept the referendum whereby the French and the Dutch people said no to the Constitution of Europe which was proposed, which constitution would lead to a super state in which we would all be mere nothings. The Germans are now saying, with the rest of Europe, and they're leading, because the Germans are the dominant power, which they've always set out to do, and they have achieved. They are the dominant power of Europe. What they're doing is seeking ways and means of bringing back that constitution. Although it was cast out, it doesn't matter. They take no for an answer, never. So they're bringing it back. How are they doing it? Well, from January, Germany becomes for 6 months the president of the European Union. Each state holds the power for 6 months. They have already prepared plans to bring back the constitution. Angela Merkel, who is the present head in Germany, has said quite openly and publicly they intend to bring the whole constitution back. The French say, no, let's bring it back in parts, piece by piece. Certain parts of Germany have also the idea of working it in quiet ways. For instance, there is a media firm in Germany, the biggest in Europe, called Bertelsmann.
Yeah.
Bertelsmann. For some reason, they have been given the power by the people running Germany today to call ordered meetings in the German Foreign Office. And at that meetings, they discuss quite openly how they're going to bring the constitution back. So the Germans are employing a front man or front firm to carry this out. The statesmen are gathered by Bertelsmann and they discuss this and promote ideas of how it's to be done. I think one French idea was to bring back a semi-constitution. The idea put up by Bertelsmann appears to be they would bring it back in two phases. One phase will be minor details, which they can easily have accepted by the people because there's little argument. But the real crux of the matter, the heart of the European Union superstate, will be carefully hidden and slid through without being noticed. This is the sort of sly tricks which are being carried on. And fortunately, our organizations are becoming aware of what's going on, and they're working as hard as they possibly can with all the members they can bring in to get us out of Europe as soon as possible. And that, to me, is the best way. You cannot do it on your own. You can write articles, you can express yourself. That you're fully entitled, and I would advise doing it. But to get strength, you need numbers. And if the people are persuaded to rise up in full strength, Parliament can't withstand them.
There's a very good quote from a favourite film of mine, V for Vendetta, and it says that governments should be afraid of their people. People should not be afraid of their governments. So, as Harry said, if we all join something, it makes your small voice into a very, very big voice, and then things can be done. Okay, so thank you so much, Harry. It's been really amazing. We're going to show you right at the end of this clip a little list of organisations you can join. There are many of them. Get on the internet, look it up. My goodness, there's strings and strings of them. Remind you again, Harry's books here. We've got...
Which gives the history of Germany.
Two excellent books. And how can we get hold of these books? How can we get hold of these books?
You can write to Bletchley Park, where they have them. You can write to the Intelligence Corps, they have them. And you can write to me, I have some.
Oh, right, okay. So you'll see details of that on a little write-up on the video site.
But there's less than 100 left of each of those two books.
Right, so hurry up everybody before they go.
And they are now at the end of the third reprint.
Right, okay. And don't forget, get out there and join something. Let them have it, because we're not going to be bullied anymore, are we?